Madonna is quite simply the most influential female singer the world has ever seen and is still widely recognised as the queen of pop. Her second album, Like a Virgin, proved to be a watershed moment in her career, when the ambitious blonde from Detroit set herself apart from other pop stars and was elevated to the higher echelons of pop superstardom. So what were the key events from that era which helped make that happen? Who were the people on her team helping her to achieve her goals? How did her signature songs such as Like a Virgin and Material Girl come about? What was she like to work with? Why didn't Madge and her mentor Nile Rodgers ever work together again? So many questions, let's find out. In late '83, Madonna's star was on the rise. Her debut album, released in August of that year, was slowly climbing up the charts, but she still had a long way to go to become the huge star she always longed to be. The ever-calculated Madge already had ambitious plans for her second album, which she hoped would help her break away from her club roots and become a major pop artist. In summer '83, Nile Rodgers went to a gig at the legendary nightclub The Roxy to see an up-and-coming artist by the name of Jenny Burton. When he inquired with some revelers about the opening act, they informed him it was Madonna, who he had already heard about from her former boyfriend, Jelly Bean Benitez. When Madonna did arrive on stage, Nile was taken aback by her performance, which involved an intricate dance routine whilst also singing, which might be commonplace today, but was usually the preserve of black artists back then. Nile says that she reminded him of a young, sexually suggestive, white Gladys Knight. In his 2011 autobiography, he wrote about his honest thoughts on Madge at the time. I didn't know what to make of Madonna. Her short opening act had left me slightly puzzled. I didn't know of any other white artists that were doing Latin hip-hop sounding music. It was weird, I was intrigued, but not convinced it worked. For her debut album, Madonna had mostly worked with Reggie Lucas, but she had found their working relationship frustrating and felt that her talent had been undermined. Madonna was still only on a 2-album deal, and she knew this record would either make or break her career. So for the all-important second album, she wanted more control, and she initially suggested to Warner's that she produce the album herself, an idea which was quickly vetoed by the label. As a compromise, Warner's did offer her the choice of any producer that she wanted. According to Classic Pop magazine, Madge wrote a letter to Sire Records boss Seymour Stein at the time, voicing her frustrations with having to work with more male producers. Apparently, her short list of potential producers at the time included Trevor Horn, Jelly Bean, Laurie Latham, Narada Michael Walden, and Nile Rodgers. Although she had a short list of ideal collaborators in mind, Rodgers was always her top choice, and Madge was a huge fan of his work with Sister Sledge and his work with his own legendary disco band Chic. Nile Rodgers at the time was at the very top of his game and arguably the hottest music producer in the industry. In 1980, he produced Diana Ross's album Diana, which spawned classic hits such as Upside Down and I'm Coming Out. He produced David Bowie's 1983 album Let's Dance, the biggest album of his career. In Seymour Stein's book, he says it was Madonna who asked Warner for Nile Rodgers to produce her second record. Nile couldn't have been hotter, and Madonna wanted him. In interviews at the time, she was quoted as saying, "I idolized Nile because of the whole Chic thing. I couldn't believe that the record company gave me the money so I could work with him." Nile negotiated a deal very much in his favour to work on the record, but more about that later. At some point in '83, Madge secured herself a new manager, and not just any old manager, but a real heavy hitter. Freddie DeMann had managed Michael Jackson during his blockbuster Thriller period, and Seymour Stein had asked him to meet his latest signing with a view to managing her. Freddie must have been impressed because of course he agreed, and the two worked together for the next 15 years. Madonna now had the biggest music producer and manager in the world on her team, and her house was now very much in order for her planned world domination. Before production began on the record, Madge played Nile some songs she had been working on with her long-term collaborator Stephen Bray. Nile wrote about that meeting in his book. We ran through a number of her demos, never listening to anything twice. I didn't show much emotion. I was only thinking about how the songs connected. Everything she played was pretty catchy, but songs are just songs, and she hired me to make an album. By the time we were through, the tone of the meeting abruptly changed. Madonna's metamorphosis from a happy-go-lucky, post-teeny bopper to a hardcore career woman blindsided me. If you don't love all of these songs, we can't work together, Madge said. Well, to be honest with you, I don't love all these songs, but I can promise you this. By the time we're finished with them, I will, Nile responded. But ultimately the two became good friends over the course of making the record and regularly hung out together. In late '83, according to Nile Rodgers' book, Tom Kelly and Billy Steinberg pitched a new song they had just written entitled Like a Virgin to Warner A&R man Michael Austin at the Warner offices in Burbank, California. Michael immediately loved the song and knew it would be perfect for Madonna. Apparently Madonna was in the building at the same time, having a meeting about her second album. Madonna instantly loved the song, and after hearing the verse and chorus, she had decided on the spot that not only would she take it, she also wanted to make it the first single and the title of her new album. The writers of the song, Tom Kelly and Billy Steinberg, at the time weren't established songwriters. They had had a minor hit with How Do I Make You, sang by Linda Ronstadt in 1980. But the success of Like a Virgin would be the beginning of a winning streak for the duo, who scored huge hits in the following years, such as So Emotional for Whitney Houston, True Colors and I Drove All Night for Cyndi Lauper, Eternal Flame for the Bangles, and I'll Stand By You for the Pretenders, among many others. Billy Steinberg has said in interviews over the years that he had been inspired to write the song after surviving a painful divorce. He originally envisioned the song as a ballad, but the song didn't work until they started experimenting with piano riffs and singing it in falsetto, at which point the 80s classic was born. It's also been widely reported the song was partly inspired by Smokey Robinson's Virgin Man. At the time of writing the song, the duo weren't feeling too positive about its chances of success, as they didn't think anybody would want to sing a song entitled Like a Virgin. But I suppose our Madge isn't just anybody. The songwriting duo who played a significant role in putting Madge's music career on the map surprisingly never met the singer until years later at a party where the chance encounter occurred, and it didn't go exactly the way Billy would have hoped. The legendary songwriter recounted the story in Lucy O'Brien's autobiography of the Star. It was a bit comical really. I was sitting on the terrace with Stephen Bray when she walked towards us with Warren Beatty. Steve said, "Madonna, this is Billy Steinberg who wrote Like a Virgin." Warren starts to laugh. I say, "Gee, I've wanted to meet you for so long." She snapped, "Well, now you did," and walked away. I was so crestfallen. She must be slightly resentful she didn't write her signature song. Madge was still only on a 2-album deal at the time and knew that her second album would either make or break her career. Her legendary ambition and work ethic was evident throughout the recording, as Nile Rodgers recalls in his autobiography. Madonna was very serious about making her record. She was much more intense about the process than I was. Maybe I was more relaxed because I was more experienced or had less at stake, or maybe it was because I knew that I was making a record with an emerging star with a crop of great material. And Madge wasn't relying solely on Like a Virgin to improve her fortunes. She'd also found another song called Material Girl, which would soon help send her career stratospheric. Peter Brown, the writer of the song, speaking to American Bandstand in 1985, said that he wrote the song with Madonna in mind. In an interview with Rolling Stone from '09, Madge reminisced about her first impressions of hearing the Material Girl and Like a Virgin demos. "I like them both because they were ironic and provocative at the same time, but also unlike me. I am not a materialistic person, and I certainly wasn't a virgin. And by the way, how can you be like a virgin? I like the play on words. I thought they were clever. They're so geeky, they're cool. I never realized they would become my signature songs, especially the second one." An episode of the Madonna fan podcast Inside the Groove details how the song came about. Apparently Peter had been trying to write for Madge for some time but couldn't think of anything until the idea for Material Girl came to him one day whilst out driving. Pretty much the whole song came to him and he then rushed home to record it and finished the lyrics with songwriting partner Robert Rands. They recorded a demo with singer Pat Hurley on vocals and Peter sent it to Madonna and Warner Brothers at the end of '83, wrapped as an Xmas present. When it came to recording Material Girl, Madge insisted on singing the song in the original key the song had been written in, even though that wasn't within her natural range, which led to friction with Nile, who disagreed with Madonna's decision. Madonna got her way and she recorded the song in its original key. Freddie DeMann initially expressed concern upon hearing Madge's vocal on the track, but accepted the recording as Madge had made the final decision on it. The idea to cover Love Don't Live Here Anymore came from Michael Austin, a Warner A&R man who felt that the album as it stood lacked an emotional centerpiece. In Warner Zane's book Revolutions in Sound, Warner Brothers Records, The First 50 Years, Austin recalled, "I had the good fortune of finding material that Madonna really responded to. Love Don't Live Here Anymore, for instance, which was the old Rose Royce record. I was driving into work one day and I heard it on the radio. I called producer Nile Rodgers and Madonna. They were in the studio. I said, I have an idea. You know the old Rose Royce record, Love Don't Live Here Anymore? Why don't you try and record a version of it for Like a Virgin?" Madge and Nile were initially reluctant to take on the ballad, but in the end they decided that Love Don't Live Here Anymore was the best option to provide the album with the diversity it really needed. The final song chosen for Like a Virgin was Dress You Up. Rodgers asked New Jersey songwriters LaRusso and Stanziel to compose a song for Madonna in the style of his band Chic. And Angel was the third single from the album, which I think was a somewhat strange decision, as Dress You Up was a far stronger song in my humble opinion. There was supposed to be a video for the song, but because of Madonna's intense schedule and the number of Madonna videos already in heavy rotation, it was vetoed. The song was of course written with long-term collaborator Stephen Bray. The two had played together in Madge's old band The Breakfast Club, and a songwriting partnership between the pair blossomed around that time. Over and Over was written by the duo in Madonna's punk rock days in the early 80s. Stephen Bray, like Madge, grew up in Detroit, listening to 60s Motown music, and that influence can be clearly heard on songs they wrote together, such as Pretender, Angel, and Shooby-Doo from the album. The earliest composition on the album, Stay, was written with Stephen Bray back in '81, and is in actual fact a combination of two songs. The Stay Stay Darlin' refrain comes from the 1981 version, and the verses and lyrics are reworked from Don't You Know. The two songs were on the original demo, which helped Madge get signed to Sire Records in '82. The album was recorded in Power Station Studios, New York in spring '84 and only took 6 weeks to produce. And despite being just an up-and-coming singer, Madge was already acting like a bona fide diva. The superstar in waiting would get very angry if any of the musicians were late for work, or if she got the impression that any of them were slacking. Nile Rodgers wrote about Madge's diva antics in his book. Their loyalty to me drove her crazy, and she tossed off some fairly insulting stuff. When they were directed at me, I could laugh her insults off, because we really did love each other. Unfortunately, other people weren't so comfortable with her verbal abuse. Our assistant had the temerity to go to the bathroom, and she freaked out on him. "Where the is he going?" she said, loudly enough that he could clearly hear. Unsatisfied that she'd made her point, she then let off a fusillade from her usual arsenal of one-liners, such as, "Time is money and the money is mine." But today her tone was laced with a cruelty that I hadn't heard before, so I confronted her. "Madonna," I said, "you can't treat people like that. He's just a guy trying to help you make the best record he can, and he needs to go to the bathroom. That he didn't ask me if he could go. If you are going to treat people who are working for you that way, I can't do this anymore." And Nile quit. Thankfully, Madge used her natural charm to diffuse the situation and to get back in Nile's good books, and the soon-to-be pop classic was rescued. According to Classic Pop magazine, the album was finished by May 84, with only mixing and the final track listing to be concluded. Surprisingly, Nile Rodgers was not all that bowled over by the title track. He wrote about the decision-making process for the lead single in his book. I was positive the first single had to be Material Girl, which I knew was a smash. Madonna had an entirely different point of view. She wanted Like a Virgin. It's funny, I'd worked with so many international superstars, but I'd never come across such an iron will before. On this subject, however, neither of us would budge without a fight. Of course, as I said before, I knew the song order was ultimately Madonna's choice. The problem was I couldn't get over the powerful sense that she was making a huge mistake. In an interview with Paper magazine from 2022, Madge and Nile said that when Freddie Demand first heard the album, he wasn't entirely bowled over by it. He suggested that the songs needed more bass and to sound more like Michael Jackson's Thriller, but Madge and Nile said in the interview they didn't take his opinion on board. Her ladyship said in a number of interviews at the time the album had been planned for June 84, but just as Madge had moved on to her second album, her debut started to pick up heat, and consequently Like a Virgin was put on hold. In January 84, Holiday became Madonna's first top 20 hit on the mainstream pop chart. By June, she had scored her first top 10 hit with Borderline, and by October, Lucky Star had gone top 5. Off the back of the success of the singles, her debut self-titled album finally started to gain some traction. Released a year earlier in August 83, it debuted at number 190, but by October 84, it had climbed to number 8. Whilst it may have delayed Madge's plans, the success of the debut album helped increase anticipation for its follow-up. Madge's stock was very much on the rise. Like a Virgin made its high-profile debut at the first annual MTV Video Music Awards in September 84, and it was to be a performance which would go down in pop culture history. Madge maintains to this very day that her shoe fell off during the performance and she was just trying to freestyle it, although I'm not sure it was all as spontaneous as she claims. Madge's performance, which saw her humping the floor and writhing and rolling around the stage suggestively, stole the show. While sexually provocative pop performances are commonplace today, in 1984, Madge's performance was nothing short of scandalous. Her manager Freddie Demand told her afterwards that she had just destroyed her career. Like a Virgin, the single was released in October 84 and ascended to the top spot in America during Christmas week 1984, where it stayed for 6 weeks. The album was released on November 12th and it reached number 1 the following February, going on to sell 10 million in America. It became the biggest of Nile's career and the second biggest of Madge's career. It would be outsold only by True Blue 2 years later. And in 85, the year following Like a Virgin's release, Madonna mania ensued, which I'm not going to cover here because that would need a whole other video by itself. Madonna shot her feature film debut Desperately Seeking Susan around the summer and autumn of 84, and when she heard they needed a track for a club scene, Madge suggested one she had already written. Into the Groove was more than likely written sometime around the summer of 84, but it wasn't written with Desperately Seeking Susan in mind, but instead for Mark Kamen's protege Shine. Madge, quick to recognise a winner as always, kept it for herself, and the song gave her her first UK number 1 and the biggest selling British single of her career, with just under 1 million copies sold. The album was re-released in summer 85 with Into the Groove as a bonus track, which helped it become Madge's first number 1 album in Britain. Stephen Bray said that Into the Groove was mostly done in a 5th floor walk up on 8th Street. Madonna and Stephen Bray wrote an original song also called Desperately Seeking Susan for the movie, but Into the Groove was chosen by the film's producer Susan Seidelman. Despite the runaway success of the album and Madge and Nile remaining friendly, the two never worked together again, which wasn't in keeping with Nile's original plans. In an interview with the Huffington Post from 2014, Nile spoke about how his original contract for the album was the reason they didn't collaborate again. "I really believed that Madonna and I would be making records forever. Like she would be my Beatles and I would be her producer forever. I'd be her guy. At the time we met, I'd just come off David Bowie's Let's Dance, which was the biggest record of his career. I'd just done Duran Duran's Reflex, the biggest single of their career, so I was this hit guy in the business. Her first album had already been out a year or more, and at the time it had only sold 750,000 units. So what happened was, when we finally signed the contract, I said I could probably sell 5 or 6 million albums with her, and they were laughing. And I said, I'm going to bet on myself. I'm going to take this insanely high royalty and no advance, and if I make that number, you have to pay me retroactively from record one. And if I do any more subsequent projects with her, this is the royalty I get paid." It was a big claim, and we sold 21 million records. These series of events were corroborated by Seymour Stein in his autobiography. The legendary music man writes about how when the album started to sell millions and Warner realized that Nile was going to earn a huge payday, a furore ensued at the record company. In an interview with Paper magazine from 2022, Madge and Nile did say that they would be interested in working together again at some point in the future. Whilst the album doesn't tend to rank highly among fans' favourite Madonna albums, and Nile Rodgers has even been quoted as saying, "As a fan, it wouldn't be what I consider my favourite Madonna album compositionally, there is no denying the cultural and commercial impact of the record." The album went to #1 all over the world and ushered in the biggest and most influential female recording artist the world has ever seen. Material Girl, Into the Groove and Like a Virgin are all still classics, accumulating hundreds of millions of streams on Spotify. Material Girl has appeared in countless movies and became a viral hit on TikTok. And Madge even reworked the song in 2019 with American rapper Saucy Santana. Like a Virgin was one of the most defining moments of Madonna's career, and is still to this day one of the images she is most closely associated with. The record also helped to establish her signature pop dance sound and also allowed Madonna to carve out her niche as a sexually provocative performer. The era's influence in many ways can still be felt today. Madonna played a huge part in creating the blueprint for modern female pop stars. It's hard to imagine how so many female artists over the last 4 decades would even exist without her. The album sparked the public's fascination with the pop comedian, which all these years later never seems to have dimmed. In 1984, Madonna took the Queen of Pop throne, and 4 decades later, it still belongs to her and her alone. Long live the Queen. And click here to watch my video about why Madge's 12th studio album, MDNA, didn't live up to expectations. Thanks for watching.